Hey guys, it's Roderick. I'm here with a review of the Mayfair Witches, Season 1, Episode 3, Second Line. So, once again, this is where, if you're new to this channel, this is where we review television shows, movies, reality television shows. We have a good key with the eye towards filmmaking, directing, and acting. So, let's get into it. So, one of the things I want to talk about that really came to the forefront with this episode is about choices, right? So as an artist, you're always going to be making choices, whether you're painting, writing, acting, directing. On a micro level, you're going to make choices, and those micro choices are then going to compound itself to a larger set of choices of what your final work is going to be. And the thing with this show is that it's making some very interesting choices, right? For example, there is a concerted choice to take the source material and to create the narrative in a certain direction by combining and eliminating certain characters. There's a choice in this show not to really over-sexualize or highly sexualize the content or the female actresses. So when we're looking at these set of choices they make, the question is, how are they going to play out at the end? Is this still going to be an enjoyable experience that we like, or are these good set of choices? The thing is, it's hard to look at the choices so early in the episode, or early into the season, because we don't know how they're going to play out. I give an example of House of Dragons. This show is giving me a House of Dragon tease because this House of Dragons on HBO was a very slow burn. Now, I will say the reason they can do that is because they have a built-in audience base that is like, you know what, we kind of trust you to some extent. We're going to see how this is going to play out, right? Maybe the Mayfair Witches is thinking the same thing, right? That they already have a built-in audience, people who've already read the books, so they can really take this very slow burn build with the narrative, because they already have this built-in audience. I think the problem with that kind of method, or that choice really, is that you don't have that much time in today's streaming. There's some new show out every day to really build and hook your audiences who may be new viewers, who may not really be as invested in the source material, right? So they're making these interesting choices with the characters, with kind of like the way the show is being paced, because the show is beautifully shot. Like, it is exceptionally shot, but they're just a set of choices that make me go, I don't know, right? So like the third episode of any series, right? You should still be ramping it up. Like, you've set the characters, you've built the world, we've increased the stakes, now we're getting into it. This is, and this episode really didn't really give us that, right? So I'm just kind of looking at it like, I don't know. But I will say I am going to continue on with the rest of the season. Now, in the season finale, if the payoff was not worth it, then we're going to light them the fuck up, right? So I'm not going to come here and kind of second guess, Monday morning quarterback their choices now in the third episode. I'm gonna play it out. I'm gonna walk down this yellow brick road with you all, and then at the end of the season, then we can really kind of make some determinations about some of the choices that they made, right? Because you never know. Because House of Dragons started off slow and then it just went straight up like this. Maybe this is what's going to happen with Mayfair Witches. I think that's a very aggressive choice or decision to make in a show, because if it does not land, if the series, or the season finale does not land, and we don't get the payoff that we've been looking for, people are going to feel some sort of way about this, right? And therefore, you're not going to be able to have the latitude in later seasons to have to take the kind of licenses that you wasted in the first season, right? For example, the show starts off with this flashback, right? So now we see the witch who was jerking somebody off by the tree. Now she's taking care of her mother. Now, anybody is like, okay, obviously that's Rowan's, predecessor, long lost relative, and we're going to kind of twine these stories together somehow, some way. But since I'm not that invested in the source material, I need you to start showing me some threads of how that's going to come together a little bit earlier than what you're doing, because it seems disjointed and that there's no kind of connection between the flashback and what's kind of happening in present time. Not now, not at episode 3. Don't, because I definitely don't care about this flashback witch, and Rowan's are kind of irking my nerves, and I'm about to be caring about her too, but we'll get to that in a second. But so that's what the investment, the audience's investment in the characters is dwindling when you decide to take a slow burn, long road narrative with the show. Anyway, let's get into the recap. So we find Rowan, so we have our flashback. Mother's been hurt by a boar. Now it's up to the next daughter to step in. Step into what? Step in to do. Guess it's going to be the village witch. Don't know what the status is. Don't know why that matters. But we're just going to go into it and say, okay. So she has to step up. Stepping into what? Anyway. Rowan's there. She's like shook. Holding Deirdre. She's bloody. Here comes Carlotta. And again, it's a very beautifully shot sequence, kind of getting like Rowan's distortion. She's like, I'm your great aunt Carlotta. And Rowan's like, I'm kind of done meeting new relatives for today. She's talking to the police. The guy comes out as like, Mr. Mayfair says he's going to be here shortly. So we're like, oh, Cortland's coming. Okay. But Rowan ain't staying for the family reunion. She goes outside and she sees Sip. Sip takes her back, to his place, and he has this kind of like super security loft or whatever like that he's used as a safe house. That's kind of like his house too, whatever. So he's talking to her and she's kind of shook, and he gets her some clothes, and then she's looking in through the drawers, being nosy. I don't go to people's houses looking in their shit, but I guess that's what people do. So she's like, why do you have these gloves? He's like, it's my gift. It's kind of, how I've learned to manage it. And she's like, well, it really didn't work with me. And he's like, well, you're different. And then we get the sense, okay, well, here's someone that Rowan can talk to who kind of has like kind of special abilities like she does. So maybe this is going to form a relationship bond. Okay, fine, whatever. Back to the aunties. Auntie 1, Carlotta, is laying on Auntie 2's lap, upset about the situation. She's like, oh, she wouldn't come with us. Oh, what are we going to do? And then Auntie 1, Carlotta's like, well, maybe we're just going to have to bind him to somebody else. So we're like, well, who we going to bind to? So then it's like, okay, she's a bind to somebody else. They're like, where's the necklace? I took it off her body. Okay, fine. So we get back to Sip and Rowan. They're back at the house. He's like, I got to go back to the hotel because I need to figure out who did this. He's going to use his special abilities to figure out who do it. You just stay here, whatever. When he goes outside, the Talamasca guy's there, the one he was talking to on the phone in the last episode, like, don't be getting into other people's business. He's like, I'm here. Sippa's like, I don't have time for this. He's like, no, I'm here. We're here to help. So then the other Talamascas are there doing the Lasher Be Gone, spraying it, throwing like the salt in or whatever. Then, the other person comes out and they do the force shield and all this to keep Lasher out the building while Sip is gone. Mind you, we're seeing this scene from the perspective of someone outside looking, so we get the sense that is like Lasher looking and seeing what's going on. So Sip is on his way over there to see what happens. In the meantime, Rowan's at the house, minding her business, sipping her some tea, doing whatever. And here comes this pregnant black lady in the door. And then Rowan has the nerve to be like, who are you? And I was like, if this ain't your house, how are you going to ask who anybody is? Because you don't know who anybody who comes through here. But whatever. She's like, oh, hi, blah, blah, blah. I forgot her name. I'm Sip's sister. So this woman's visibly pregnant. She's like looking for her shoes. And Rowan's like, well, how far along are you? I think she was like in the last trimester. She's like, oh, are you really excited? She's like, not really, because you find out this woman's a surrogate, right? And then Rowan decides to be like, well, your baby's going to wonder about you. Your baby's going to wonder about what you're doing. And I was like, girl, like, projecting much? Like, get out of these people's business. Like, you don't know her. Like, you just could have sat on the couch and just moved your feet while she got her shoes. Like, how is this any of your business at all, right? But I guess the point is to demonstrate Rowan's sense of loss and her detachment, that kind of hole in her heart that she's had for her adoptive mother. Now, I don't know what that's like. I have both my parents. I'm not adopted. I don't know if people who are adopted feel that way. The problem with that scene is that outside of her seeing Deirdre killed in the elevator, we didn't get the sense that Rowan was really kind of questioning or wondering about her adoptive parents, right? All was great, until her mother died. So maybe again, I always say I'm built real differently. So I'm an Aquarius. I'm built just a little bit differently for these kind of wispy, like traumatic kind of things. So I just kind of chalk that up to maybe that's how regular folks deal with shit. Could be not, right? Anyway, so pregnant lady leaves, though then we get a smoke alarm, right? So then pregnant lady and Rowan go outside because they have a smoke alarm. So she's outside and the fire people are there and we're like, oh shit, Lasher done started a fucking fire. What's going to happen just to get her out the house? So then Rowan's decision, right? So this is, Rowan decides to wander to the random house in New Orleans and not give Sip a call or her cell phone to be like, hey, the fire alarm just went out. I'm outside. What's our next move, right? So her decision is, and now you done had all this freaking shit that happened to you. You gonna go to a random house with your Aunt Carlotta, who you just randomly met, and just sit up in their house till Sip gets back? Why did you not call Sip when the fire alarm went off? But we say okay, right? Whatever. Because I'm sure when the book was written, cell phones weren't that prevalent, and that's probably what she did anyway. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Now, we go back to Sip, and Sip is in the hotel room, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. So he's talking Creole to the man. He takes off his gloves, takes it with the elevator thing, and he starts touching and doing whatever, and he's just coming out with static. Just static, 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 static. And I was like, huh, interesting. We don't know who it was. He can't figure out who it was. He's kind of perplexed. So he's like, okay, cool. I got one more thing I need to check. Mind you, Cortland is back and he's in the bathroom because he done talked to the people at the hotel because like he kind of owns the hotel via this trust or whatever. They're like, we don't know what's going to happen. And all of a sudden, the wind starts to rustle, right? So in the scene with the aunts, they were like, oh, he's rustling because he's upset because his whore's dead or whatever. So we hear that same rustling recording, and then Lasher shows up. And then Lasher's like, and the caller's like, I'm sure that you're upset just as upset as I am. I loved her too. And then Lasher's like, I'm still going to get to her, whatever. So we find out that Lasher and Cortland are in cahoots, right? Which is what we kind of thought from the first episode when young Deirdre shows up to the party and then Cortland had these two boys and the whole thing. Like, we kind of got the sense they were in cahoots, but they're really kind of teasing out like this whole, like how much are they in cahoots? Because what we find out is that all of the Mayfair witches is only the female witches, right? So Cortland has no powers, right? He's not a witch or a warlock. So he's just a simp for Lasher, I guess. Who knows, right? Anyway, get on back. Now the aunties have come up with a plan, right? So aunties are like, we're going to bind him to somebody else. Well, who they going to bind him to? They're going to bind him to the maid, right? And this whole sequence just like felt some sort of way to me. I don't know, maybe again, because I'm just, I'm black and whatever. It just didn't, there's a way in which you could have done this scene. And the problem is not reading the source material. This may be how it's written in the source material. So I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the writers that they're being true to the source material and not just taking creative license as a reason to be subtly racist and very Gone with the Wind roots tease, because that's as much what they were going to do. So the aunties take the necklace and give it to the maid and tell the maid to put it on and bind it to the maid and lock the maid downstairs in the basement, right? Which, okay, practically speaking, you got to bind him to somebody, but came off like this is your it came off more like this is your punishment versus doing what you got to do, right? Like, I recognize both situations were present, but it kind of tilted to that kind of way. But again, it's New Orleans. I'm not going to be brand new about this, but the way the scene just came off just was like, I don't know about that. Like, it just, and again, they didn't have to bind it. They could have bound it to anybody. They could have ordered Girl Scout cookies to have some random person come over. So the maid was not the only option to bind. It just definitely felt like this was a revenge/racist way to deal with the maid for letting Deirdre go out or whatever like that, which is fine, but if you're going to have a pseudo racist character like that, like again, the choices, it's not about the choices, it's about how you commit to the choices, right? So I don't want to hear later on about how this character's not racist and you do racist shit, right? So anyway, that's that. So that's pretty much the aunts for most of the episode. So now Rowan is wandering to New Orleans. She comes across the second line, which is New Orleans, like a funeral procession where they celebrate the dead. She's standing there. Then there's a random person who's standing there, this woman, and she's like, I'm just crying for somebody else. Did you know him? Child, it's Lasher. He's inhabited this old lady, and he's like, oh, have a drink. So then she has a drink. Some from those little vials they have on Bourbon Street or whatever, like it's like a shot. Somehow he's magically roofied her or whatever, and then he shows up. And they're doing this kind of like tete-a-tete dance and whatever. So if you're like me, right, who's been watching the show for 2 episodes, you're like, oh shit, they about to fuck in the graveyard. Oh fuck, they gonna fuck on the street. Because Deirdre's very sexually positive woman, sexually adventurous, not kink shaming anybody. But did you kind of get the sense that they were gonna kind of like do it then, right? But she doesn't. Like she does all, and so I was like, okay, fine. But that whole sequence, like she's there and she's seeing the dead people and he's kind of like seducing her and doing the thing. I was like, okay, why, right? Okay, we find out when he was talking to Cortland that it's about that, I guess Rowan is the 13th witch. So I think that Lashley went through 12 of her other ancestors, and I guess that she's supposed to be the jackpot, because I guess if he gets the 13th, he gets his ticket punched or whatever like that. But we're still not seeing why this is important for him to get Rowan, because theoretically, isn't Rowan really his daughter or something like that? So I was like, okay, but again, we get the whole thing of her being on the other side. Then he leads her back to the house, and then here comes her mother out, and here comes Deirdre out, and she's like talking, and she's like, you're powerful, you're special, you kind of have to lean into this. And then Rowan kind of gets the sense that that's not really her mother, right? Not like the dream she saw when she saw Carlotta, and she's like, you're not her. So then she leaves, right? Meanwhile, Sip is at the morgue, pretending to be a medical student, looking at Deirdre's body, and then he touches her, and we get kind of like the flashback in his eyes of what he sees, and he sees, Rowan's bird and whatever. Come to find out that the coroner is part of this kind of anti-witch congregation, that when he leaves, it's like, I know you're not a medical student, she's a witch. So now we've inserted on top of all of this that there's like some anti-witch brotherhood against witches situation, and I don't think that Mayfair Witches has established enough to be adding more shit on top of this, right? So I was just like, okay, where is this gonna go? Okay, so Sip goes back to the house, brings Rowan some Chinese food, okay? So they're starting to eat. We're going to do a quick cut back at the aunties, because now they done locked up the maid in the basement, and then the maid is banging her head up against the wall, literally killing herself because Lasher is mad that he's now bound to the maid. Cortland is rifling through Rowan's shit at the hotel room or whatever like that, doing Lasher's bidding. So we still don't know kind of what Cortland's end game is. Like, why is he helping Lasher? Whatever. What's his great ass going to be? But what Sips tells Rowan is that there was a man who got on the elevator with her, but we don't know who the man is, right? Now, they have not revealed to us who the man is, because you notice they give us a flashback of everything but that, right? But we don't know as a viewer who was the man that got into the elevator with Deirdre. So I guess it's supposed to be some big shock aha. At this point, since there's not that many men in the mix, who could it be, right? Is it Cortland? Like, is it like they're not showing us who the potential man is who showed in the elevator? So I guess that's going to be a big reveal. Hopefully that pays off. So then finally they eat their Chinese food, and she's like, I want to find out what's happening. He's like, well, I can help you. We can go through this whole thing. So instead, so then he's like, okay. So she starts to takes his glove off, and pretty much gives you like a very like, this is about to be a sex scene tease. So instead of them having sex, okay, because again, there's been a conscious choice not to overly sexualize this show, they grasp hands, and there's a glow, And I get it. But I get it's okay, right? It's a choice. I'm gonna say to leave that there. It's a choice, right? So anyway, and that's kind of how the episode ends. So again, this episode is definitely giving me a straight hard C. You know, it moved the narrative, did not move the narrative at all that much, right? We don't know who cleared Deirdre. We don't know anything about the Mayfair history. We don't know Rowan ain't no closer like dealing with her powers. We don't know anything more about Sip. All we know is the maid is dead and that Anna Carlotta is a fucking bitch, right? That's not worth 42 minutes of my time, right? So again, I think that the show is really taking a license that the people who are invested in this source material are really going to ride this out, but you're not doing any favors to the people who are not invested in the source material, who are more invested in the whole universe of what you've built, as opposed to, you know, investing, you know, really staking your claim with people who are invested in the source material. So again, that's the choice. Let's see how these choices play out. Like I said, I'm riding with Mayfair Witches to the very end, so that way we can see how it goes. But anyway, if you like this video, please like it, please share, please subscribe, put the alerts up. You know, we got a couple more shows coming out in the next month or so that's going to be really interesting. You know, Severance, Real Housewives of New Jersey, they're coming up. So put on your alerts, and you guys have a great, fabulous week. Bye.